This is World Info Boss, and tonight, the Middle East is facing another dangerous turning point. New reports describe U.S. strikes, Iranian retaliation, renewed pressure around the Strait of Hormuz, and warnings that a fragile pause between Israel and Iran could break again at any moment. The situation is moving fast, but one thing is clear. This is no longer only about missiles in the sky. It is about shipping lanes, military bases, oil markets, diplomacy, and the risk of a wider regional war. In this report, we break down what happened, what is confirmed, what is still claimed by the different sides, and why the next 48 hours could be critical. The latest phase of the crisis centers on U.S. and Israeli operations against Iran, followed by Iranian and allied responses across the region. The Institute for the Study of War and the Critical Threats Project report that their daily updates are now focused on U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran and the response from Iran and the so-called Axis of Resistance. Their June 11th assessment says Tehran is trying to magnify the informational effect of its strikes, using pressure and public messaging to shape negotiations with Washington. CNN's live reporting from June 9th and 10th described a second night of U.S. military strikes against targets inside Iran. According to that reporting, the strikes targeted surveillance capabilities, communication systems, and air defense sites. CNN also reported that Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it carried out retaliatory strikes targeting U.S. bases in the region, with warnings issued to Americans in Jordan, interceptions reported by Kuwait, and sirens sounding in Bahrain. Those reports underline how quickly a conflict centered on Iran and Israel can spread into the wider region. The biggest strategic concern right now is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It is one of the world's most important maritime chokepoints because energy shipments from Gulf producers move through this corridor before reaching global markets. When tensions rise near Hormuz, the effect is not limited to the battlefield. It can reach fuel prices, shipping insurance, supply chains, and political decision-making far beyond the Middle East. The Institute for the Study of War reported that Iran announced it had closed the Strait of Hormuz, while also cautioning that it remained unclear whether that statement would translate into actual changes beyond existing coercive maritime behavior. That distinction matters. A public claim is not the same as a sustained physical closure, but the announcement itself can still create uncertainty. Markets react to uncertainty. Shipping companies react to uncertainty. Governments react to uncertainty. That is why every patrol, every interception, and every warning in these waters carries strategic weight. Official U.S. Central Command footage released through DVIDS shows maritime enforcement and naval operations in the region. One clip identifies U.S. forces disabling the Guinea-Bissau-flagged MT Jalvir in the Gulf of Oman after, according to the official caption, the vessel attempted to transport oil from Iran through the Gulf of Oman. The footage is official public release material, and in this video it is used as context for the maritime dimension of the conflict. The crisis is also tied to the fragile and complicated relationship between Israel, Iran, and Lebanon. The BBC reported on June 7th that Israel and Iran said they would pause strikes, but both sides warned they would retaliate if the ceasefire was breached. The BBC also reported that President Trump said the United States and Iran were very close to signing what he called a powerful deal, but the same reporting made clear that the situation remained fragile, especially because Lebanon and Hezbollah remain part of the wider regional equation. That is the dangerous pattern in this conflict. A strike in one place can trigger pressure in another. A warning from one capital can cause military forces elsewhere to move to higher alert. A maritime announcement can raise economic pressure even before ships are physically stopped. This is why analysts describe the current moment as not just a battlefield crisis, but a pressure campaign operating on several levels at once. U.S. forces across the region are now central to the story. CNN reported that Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed retaliatory strikes targeting U.S. bases, and that warnings or defensive actions were reported in Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain. These locations matter because the United States maintains military partners and personnel across the Middle East.
The Institute for the Study of War's June 11th assessment argues that some Iranian strikes appear designed to have informational and economic effects rather than decisive military effects. In plain language, the goal may be to show resolve, raise costs, and convince Washington that continued military pressure will be expensive. For the United States, the challenge is to deter further attacks while avoiding a spiral that could turn limited strikes into a broader war. That is why naval operations, patrols, and watchstanding may look routine on video, but they are not routine in context.
A sailor standing watch, a patrol aircraft scanning open water, and a ship moving through contested waters all become part of the larger message: readiness, deterrence, and control of escalation. There is also a diplomatic track running in parallel. Al Jazeera's June 11th live page framed the day around President Trump canceling strikes and saying a deal had been approved, while describing the broader story as part of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran and Israel's attacks on Lebanon. BBC reporting from earlier in the week also quoted Trump saying the United States and Iran were close to signing a deal. But the existence of negotiations does not mean the conflict is over. The Institute for the Study of War argues that Iran does not view the current phase simply as negotiations in search of a deal. According to that analysis, Tehran believes it is at war and that the war will end with a deal. That difference is important. If one side sees military pressure as part of bargaining, then strikes, threats, and public statements may continue even while diplomats talk. For viewers trying to understand the news, the key is to separate three layers. First, there are confirmed actions, such as official military footage, public statements, and reported strikes. Second, there are claims by governments and armed groups, which must be treated carefully because every side has an incentive to shape public perception. Third, there is analysis, which helps explain what the actions may mean, but should not be confused with confirmed fact. So what should the world watch next? The first indicator is the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran's statement about closure turns into repeated vessel disruptions, attempted interdictions, mine threats, or direct attacks on shipping, the economic impact could expand quickly. If traffic continues under military escort or heightened monitoring, the announcement may remain more political than operational. The second indicator is U.S. force protection. Any confirmed casualties or major damage at U.S. facilities would dramatically raise pressure for a response. The third indicator is Israel and Lebanon. If strikes in Lebanon intensify, Iran may use that front to increase pressure on Israel and the United States. The fourth indicator is diplomacy. If Washington and Tehran publicly confirm progress toward a deal, markets may calm. If talks collapse, both sides may return to military pressure. The fifth indicator is messaging. In this conflict, statements are not just statements. When leaders claim victory, threaten escalation, or announce control over shipping lanes, they are speaking to domestic audiences, enemy governments, financial markets, and regional allies at the same time. That is why official claims must be watched carefully, but not accepted uncritically. The bottom line is this: the Middle East crisis has entered a high-risk phase where military action, maritime pressure, and diplomacy are happening at the same time. The danger is not only a single strike. The danger is miscalculation. One missile, one ship incident, one failed interception, or one misread political signal could pull more countries deeper into the conflict. For now, the world is watching the Strait of Hormuz, U.S. bases, Israel's next moves, Iran's response, and whether diplomacy can slow the momentum toward a wider war. World Infoboss will keep tracking the verified facts, the official footage, and the developments that matter most. If you want clear global updates without the noise, subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, do you think this crisis will move toward a deal or toward a larger regional war?
There is one more factor viewers should understand. Legal, official footage often shows only part of the story. Much of the most dramatic battlefield video online is copyrighted, unverified, edited for propaganda, or posted without clear permission. That is why this report uses public release footage as visual context and keeps the narration tied to traceable sources. In a crisis like this, accuracy matters more than shock value. The broader question is whether the current escalation is meant to force negotiations, or whether it is becoming harder for any side to control. If the goal is pressure, then limited strikes, maritime warnings, and public threats may continue, while officials privately test the terms of a deal. If the goal shifts toward punishment or regime pressure, the risk of expansion increases sharply. For ordinary people watching from outside the region, the most important developments may seem technical: air defense sites, surveillance systems, patrol routes, tanker movements, and military alert levels. But those technical details are the early warning signals. They tell us whether governments are preparing to step back, hold position, or move deeper into confrontation. The story is also changing by the hour. A confirmed ceasefire statement, a direct attack on shipping, a successful diplomatic meeting, or a strike that causes mass casualties could all transform the situation overnight. That is why World Infoboss will continue following verified reporting, official releases, and credible analysis instead of rumor-driven clips that may spread quickly but mislead viewers.
As you watch the images in this report, remember that some clips show current operations while others show official context footage from the same regional military posture. Every visual should be understood with its caption. The real issue is not one dramatic image, it is the pattern. Pressure at sea, pressure in the air, pressure on regional bases, and pressure at the negotiating table.